Now then, how you doing? I hope you're all good. My name's Dave Kay and you are watching the Yorkshire Bike Mechanics YouTube channel. If this is your first time here, then thanks for tuning in. Please subscribe and I hope you enjoy what we do. So, I know we've got a bit of warmth today. We've got some nice weather today. It's nice and warm. I've taken my fleece off, got my shirt on. But before we get into the nitty gritty, I want to tell you about a couple of people that I met a few weeks ago. Mark and Hannah, I can't even remember her name. And you know, I thought I were the most bonkers person on the planet. But when I bumped into these two, when these two came into the workshop, I'm not kidding, what a laugh we had. But they also run a YouTube channel. So if you can, please tune into their YouTube channel. It's Mark Frost Cycling, if you get a minute or two. Have a tune in and subscribe. They're really nice people, absolutely bonkers, and they've got really good banter between them. So, enough of that, on with the show. In the workshop today, we've got a lovely Cannondale Motera e-bike. Do you know, and I seem to be getting more and more e-bikes in this workshop. I don't know what it is. I think it's because they need more work than most other bikes. But this particular bike, we've got error messages coming out of our lug oils with this one. We've got the main one, which is showing at the minute, if you can have a look on screen, is E010, okay, which is quite a major one. Anything beginning with E is a nasty error message to get. Anything beginning with a W is fairly easy to sort out, but the E ones are a little bit more in depth. Now it's showing E10, okay, which is a potential new motor. It's a complete failure of the motor. Now it could be that simply it's because that the software or the firmware needs updating in the motor. It could be that the battery needs updating firmware wise. It could be lots of different things. It could be that there's a sensor issue, but what it's saying is, the motor is saying, I can't function anymore because there's something not quite right in the motor which we need to sort out. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to plug it in to Diagnostics, Shimano Diagnostics, and we'll see what's going on and what it's telling us. So let's do that now. Let's crack on. Okay, so let's click next, and hopefully that'll show us all the configuration and all the settings in relation to the bike that we've got plugged in. And the next thing that we need to do is we need to have a look at the error logs, and that's within maintenance. So once we click on that, it should show us what error logs are currently in the system, and this is no surprise to us because we already know what these errors are. It's giving us a little bit of advice which is not particularly helpful because all it's saying is it's just taking, take your bike to the dealer. So the other thing that we need to do before we do anything else, we need to run a report off the current system just in case we need to send that Shimano, because they will ask for a diagnostic report before they'd actually consider doing anything about the motor at all. So that's the next thing that we need to do, is we need to export a complete report about the bike, and we need to save that. So once we've done that, then we need to perform our own little error check on the system, and we'll select the components that we need to check, the first one being the motor and the second one being the switch. We won't bother with anything else for now because we know that the problems that we've got is with the motor. So it's asking us to perform some simple things like turn the crank 4 times, which we are doing right at this second as you are watching this video. And once it's done that, it will ask us to do the exact same procedure and turn it around 4 times again. Now once we've done that and we can click next, it should actually give us an idea of what it's found. And as we suspected, it's brought up a fault, okay? So once that's actually done that, then what we need to do is basically have a look within the report what it's just actually given us about that particular diagnosis that we've just followed, and it's given us a little bit of advice there on the top. Now it's recommending that we actually refit the speed sensor and also update the firmware as well. So that's what we'll actually go ahead and do. Okay, so we can see from the diagnostics that we've obviously got an error there, and it's on the motor. The firmware is suggesting that it's the latest firmware. We have updated it and reinstalled the firmware on each component, but it's still not made any difference. We did that off camera, by the way. So my next step now is to have a look at the speed sensor cable, the magnet sensor cable that runs into the motor. See if we can actually find any nicks or any kind of damage on there. And it's worth replacing that, because your next step is obviously a discussion with Shimano as to what this potentially could be. Now, this motor is out of warranty. However, Shimano are really flexible, and it might be that we can actually ask them to take a look at it with a review to replacing it under the out of warranty motor scheme that they run. But replacing the speed sensor is the next thing that we should try before we have any kind of further discussions with Shimano. This is what we're going to replace it with, okay? It's a like-for-like speed sensor, and we'll replace that and then we'll try again. So as you can see, I've actually taken the right-hand side of the motor casing off so we can access these input cables here. This one here is obviously the main power from the battery. We've got one for the controller on the left-hand bar, on the left-hand handlebar. We've got this one, which is probably the display. And then this one is the speed sensor one. Now we know it's a speed sensor one because there's a slight little notch out of the bottom. So what I've done, as you can see, I've turned the bike upside down. And it's always best to work on your motor when it's upside down if you can. Particularly when you're loosening the motor or you're taking it out of the frame, because if it's the other way around and you accidentally slip, then that motor's going on the floor. So it's best if you do it from upside down. So I've loosened these bolts. They don't look particularly nice, to be honest. They look like they've been covered in salt and bits like that from road. So we'll clean them up before we put them back. So I've loosened them all, but I'm just going to take them all out. There's 3 on either side. The only wire that I've disconnected is the speed sensor wire. The other end of it is there, as you can probably see. So I'm just going to loosen these and get them out. Okay, so I've got all the bolts out, and all I need to do basically is lift this motor slightly out of the way so I can get this through, get this old one out and the new one in. So I'll just wiggle it slightly. That's it. So I can, that's it. I don't need to take it out any more than that. There's the sensor wire. So to get that under there, remembering which way it went. Okay, and we'll get the new sensor. And we'll just feed this back through where it came from before, being very careful not to crush it, squash it, or anything like that. There it goes. Okay, I can get hold of that. Okay, push it up round there and just lay that in the bottom, nice and out of the way so it's not getting squashed. And then I can drop this motor back in very carefully, not to squash anything, into this cradle. And here we are. Okay, we don't want the same procedure as what we've had with the old one, so it's important to take care. Here we are, it's going in now. Any kind of restriction, you know that you're in the wrong place or you're squashing something. And it's always best to get hold of these cables, and so you can move them about before you go ahead and push that back in. There you go, it's going in nicely, is that now? Take us tool, wherever we've done with it, here it is. Okay, and we just push that in there. That's it. And we'll just move that new one out of the way completely so it's not going to get trapped. Okay, so now what we need to do is clean those bolts up that we've took out, put them back in, and then I'll come back in a second. So we've got the bike back the right way around. We've put the bolts in the engine, we've torqued them up, we've put some Loctite on them as well. Okay, so now what we're going to do is, as new sensor cable, we're going to offer it back up to where it should be in the frame. Now what we're going to do that for basically is we're going to find out what the distance is between the edge of the magnet sensor and the actual magnet on the wheel itself. So if we put it up to where it would normally go, which is there, okay, we can just hold that there because that's the way it would normally sit. And we need to determine whether we need to get a spacer between the magnet and the actual sensor. Now if I get a tool to measure that distance there, just bear with me a second. So the maximum distance away from the magnet should be round about 15 to 17 maximum distance. So we need to just measure that just to see what in actual fact we've got. So if I hold that there up to there, and we'll just measure that distance. Now that is round about at the maximum distance that it should be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a spacer behind there to bring it a little bit closer. When you buy a new sensor, it comes with the spacer that fits behind the sensor. I'll just show you it there, see if you can see it. There's the spacer. Okay, and this comes with two bolts, a longer one and a shorter one, depending on which that you need. So I'm actually going to use this spacer because I think it'll bring it better. It'll bring it closer to the actual magnet. And it's always best to use the new magnet because you get a new magnet as well with it. Okay, so we'll just give that a quick tighten just to hold it in its place. That'll do. And then this particular wire here, we just need to make sure it's out of the way of the tyre. Okay, we can clip it to there and we can clip it to there, but remember we don't want to clip it too tight. So we're all back together. Casing's on the motor, back wheels in, the new speed sensor's on, we've brought it closer to the magnet, we put a new magnet on it, and all that's left to do now really is to turn it back on and see what happens. Now having said that, before I go ahead and turn it on, it may be that we still get that error message again, that E010 message. And in itself, although that might be a bad thing, it's not a bad thing in a way because the speed sensor cable did actually look damaged. And if we hadn't come across that, we might have been in two minds whether to replace this speed sensor cable or not. But it did look damaged and we replaced it, which is probably what Shimano might advise us to do before we did anything else, particularly if it looked damaged. Now the process is, let's turn it on, let's see what happens, and then we'll go from there. Well, I'm sorry to say, after all that, this display is still showing the E010 message, although you can't see it because the light's shining on it. So, plan B. Right, let's give Shimano a ring. Let's ask their advice. They're likely to have a look at this under the outer warranty scheme. It's a really good scheme that they offer dealers, just in case motors are not serviceable or not salvageable, and we can't put them right here. So they'll consider it as a new replacement at a discounted cost, which is a good thing for customer really. So we've tried as best with this particular error. The speed sensor cable looked damaged. It wasn't in particularly good condition, so we did the right thing in replacing it. And for the sake of 37 quid, which is what a speed sensor costs, it could have actually solved this issue, and it would have avoided us talking to Shimano and looking for a replacement motor. So not the outcome that we wanted, but nevertheless, the process, it gives you an idea of what the process is, and I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you're not already, and I'll see you later. Toodle pip.